So can you people observe this cover page of solid state heading and tell me what is this GIF? So can you tell me, look at the temperature and movement and everything. Can you just know what is this process and tell me, is there any concept connected to this? Anybody? What is this all about? If you look at the temperature, you will get an idea. Huh? No idea?
Heating
Movement
of
of
solid.
particles.
Okay. Any other? Kishan, you're about to say something?
Movement of particles at different
Movement
temperature.
of particle. Okay. And after that, there is no movement of particle. Huh? That is the way. Uh, Next, anybody else?
Variations in room temperature.
Yes, Vinay, louder.
Sir, variations in room temperature.
Variation is wrong. Okay, okay. You would have studied this in first year. That's why I'm telling you. Hmm? Okay, hint is I have also done, I think, one revision class for you, introduction class for you in the beginning of this academic year before our commencement of classes. I did this chapter from first year views.
Thermodynamics.
Huh?
Thermodynamics.
Tell me
Thermodynamics.
then, what is
Thermodynamics.
this? What is this all about? Uh, so you have got thermodynamics first law, second law, and is there any law that connects to this now? Hmm? Is there any law that connects to this now? First law, second law? Make it fast. No? Rather, this is neither first law nor second law. It is third law. Okay? Okay. So what is the third law? I'll just tell you in a while. So this actually depicts the third law. Okay. Fine. We'll take a further. In our last class, what we have studied, we studied about different ionic solids structures, and as a preamble we studied the position of octahedral voids, tetrahedral voids, and we encountered the structure of sodium chloride, cesium chloride, zinc sulfide, calcium fluoride, fluoride structure, sodium oxide, antifluoride structure. All these things we have done in the last class, and couple of MCQs we have worked out. So today we are at the last phase of this chapter. So what is remaining is to know about something called defects, defects in solids, and afterwards properties of solids. Which properties? Electrical properties and magnetic properties. So we just need to give some elaboration on these properties and defects. If you study this much, by and large, the theory portion of solid state completes. Okay, then we shall take up MCQs. So today we are going to take up these three concepts. First on the defects. Fine. So what is it all about? Let's see now. Okay, I'll just allow people here. One second. Okay. See, defects means what? Basically, See, you take any solid, particles are arranged in 3 dimension in a close packing manner. We know that. Okay. So particles are very closely packed in 3 dimension. So we know that particles, when they are arranged, there is a perfect geometry because we are speaking about crystalline solids. So crystalline solids will have perfect geometry. That's fine. But if I say this statement, we may be surprised. What is that? The crystalline solids will have perfect geometry of particles only at 0 Kelvin. That we say no, absolute zero temperature. Nothing but 0 Kelvin. Nothing but minus 273.15 degrees centigrade. Correct? At that temperature, there is a perfect geometry. Then how about at room temperature? See, that's what I have written here. But they have it only at absolute zero. When I say absolute zero, it is 0 Kelvin. So it's all about the third law of thermodynamics. That is what the GIF we have seen in the beginning in the cover page of solid state. Okay. Entropy of a perfect crystalline solid. Entropy of a perfect crystalline solid is zero at 0 Kelvin. Okay. So when temperature decreases and goes to 0 Kelvin, the entire entropy of the system will cease out and almost become zero. Actually, they say it reduces to a minimum constant value, which is almost taken as zero like that. Okay. Anyhow, the statement gives you an idea. As temperature decreases, entropy decreases. Entropy is nothing but disorder. You know that. So disorder decreases at 0 Kelvin. It will cease out. Is that okay? So finally, the entropy of the system becomes. I think you can recollect the GIF we have seen. Okay, let me go back and see 1 second. I'll just allow people here. 5 minutes early, people have to come. See what is this? Okay. So 1 second. You can see here entropy of a perfect crystalline solid is zero at absolute zero. You can see 300 Kelvin it is 0 Kelvin. Of course, degree Kelvin it's been written, no problem. So 300 Kelvin, there is movement, randomness, and all those things. Whereas at 0 Kelvin, so all the particles will freeze out and there will be no disorder. That's the meaning of that. Okay, so fine, we'll take it. So uh, we say solid particles will be neatly arranged. There will be a perfect geometry in crystalline solids. That's all fine. But under normal conditions of temperature and pressure, there won't be perfect geometry. That means particles deviate from the perfect geometry. So if there should be perfect geometry, it should be 0 Kelvin as per third law of thermodynamics. Okay. So under normal conditions of temperature and pressure, what happens? As temperature increases, particles deviate from orderly arrangement. Okay. So there may be particles arranged in a row and column. As temperature increases, they acquire some energy and they start moving out of their lattice position. Not all the particles. There may be some particles, whichever has acquired the sufficient energy, it will just dislocate. Okay, fine. So in such cases, any deviation from the perfect orderly arrangement of particles constitutes a defect. Any deviation from perfect orderly arrangement is called a defect or a imperfection. So you can assume in your college, every bench will have four students. If there is a instead of four students, if there is one more extra guy accommodated in a bench, then it can be a deviation from orderly arrangement, can be called as a defect. Okay, there is one guy who is absent. Instead of four people, only three people have been seated there, so one is vacant. That is also a defect. Okay, then any deviation, when I say that there is a person, instead of sitting, four people have to sit, right? One guy is sitting on the dais, where you keep the books and all. So it is dislocated. One guy is below, on the ground, he is sitting below the bench. That is also a defect. So like that, any deviation from regular arrangement or orderly arrangement of particles can be called as a defect or a imperfection. So we are going to study different types of defects, imperfections in all the solids. Okay. Now you can see generally defects arise during crystallization of solid. So these kind of defects, most of them will happen during the formation itself, when ionic solid is being crystallized. Generally sodium chloride crystallizes from the solution. So like that, during the formation itself, the defects will happen. Okay, so or induced into the system. Fine. Now we are going to take up types of defects. Actually there are variety of defects, like the defect that happens at a particular lattice point is called point defect. The defect which happens over a row of particles is called line defect. Likewise, there is surface defects, volume defects also. But now in our syllabus, we need to study about different types of point defects. Okay, so point defects and line defects are two things. Deviation from ideal arrangement around a point, that is point in a crystalline solid, is what is a point defect, while deviation from ideal arrangement in the entire row of crystalline solids is what is the line defect. Okay, now we'll study the different types of point defects and elaborate it. Under point defects, there are three categories: stoichiometric defects, non-stoichiometric defects, impurity defects. Stoichiometry, stoichiometry is a branch which deals with proportions, composition, formulae, all this thing, right? So stoichiometry means proportions or composition. That's the meaning we get. Stoichiometric defect, non-stoichiometric defect, and impurity defect. Let's see what is this stoichiometric defect all about. Stoichiometric defects are those defects which, when exist in a solid, they doesn't affect the stoichiometry of the solid. Stoichiometric defect doesn't affect the stoichiometry, means composition. Okay, mole proportion will not be affected. For example, if you take a particular solid like NaCl, after these stoichiometric defects exist in NaCl, the formula of the defective solid still will be NaCl itself. So that means for every one Na plus, there will be one Cl minus. That ratio will not change. That's the meaning. So stoichiometric defects are such defects which doesn't affect stoichiometry, composition, or mole proportion, something like that. Okay, so fine. They are also called intrinsic or thermodynamic defects for the reason that they depend on temperature. As temperature increases, defects also increase. That's why thermodynamic defects. Now, stoichiometric defect can happen in non-ionic solids, can be covalent solids, and ionic solids. Slight difference will be there. Okay, so in non-ionic solids, two types of stoichiometric defects. In ionic solids also there are two types. We'll see. Of course, there is common features in both the cases. We'll see two types in each. In case of non-ionic solids, that is covalent solids, we can say, there are two types of stoichiometric defects. One is vacancy defect. What is vacancy? Vacancy is just there is no particle in a particular lattice site. That's the meaning, right? So vacancy defect means some lattice points are vacant, some lattice sites are vacant. That is, particles are absent in the lattice points. Such vacant sites also induce defect. Okay, so some particles will be absent in the lattice. So if particles are absent in the lattice site, they are not present in the entire solid. That's the meaning. So when particles are absent, mass decreases in the solid. When mass decreases, mass by volume density also decreases. So as vacancy defect increase, density decreases. Okay, so the solids with vacancy defect have lesser density when compared to non-defective solids. That's the meaning. So when it comes to interstitial defects, some constituent particles occupy interstitial sites, that is void spaces, interstices, voids, holes, everything is same. So in some solids, what happens? Constituent particles in the solid itself, some particles will go and occupy interstitial sites or voids. Then it is also deviation from regular arrangement. So then it is a defect. Of course, it's called interstitial defect. Okay, so what actually happens about density? Since particle dislocates from a position and go and occupy another void there in the solid, overall mass remains same. So what actually we can conclude? Density doesn't get affected. So this doesn't affect density. Fine. So we are going to take up this pic here. You can observe the screen and the cursor here. See, this is vacancy. Some particles are absent. Okay, so this is vacancy defect. Interstitial particle, rather than impurity, you can say particle. So some extra particle is there in the void space or interstices. So this is interstitial defect. That's fine. So these are the two types of defects in non-ionic solids. Is it okay? Now similar defects are seen in ionic solids. Two types of defects. Fine. In ionic solids, there are two types of stoichiometric defects. One is Schottky defect. What is this Schottky defect all about? Equal number of positive ions and negative ions are missing from lattice points. Now the question is, why equal number? Some 10 negative ions and 5 positive ions can be missing, or only positive ions can be missing, or only negative ions can be missing. No. So why equal number of positive and negative ions are missing here? Any reason as you can guess?
The stoichiometry will be affected.
Okay. That is one thing, Mr. Vinay. So stoichiometry will be affected. That's fine. Apart from that, since it is an ionic solid, electrical neutrality is the main concern. So if only negative ions will miss out, the solid will become positively charged. Or if positive ions only miss out, the negative charges will be more. Any solid that exists in the nature is electrically neutral. So electrical neutrality is the main concern in ionic solids. When these defects happen in ionic solids, it happens in such a way that electrical neutrality is maintained. So for that, equal number of positive and negative ions have to be missed out. It always happens like that. So if one cation is missing, equally one anion will also be missing. It may be one anion or one negative charge. That is what we need to mention. Okay. So if one cation is missing, so one anion is also would be missing. So that electrically, so it all becomes neutral. 1 second, I'll just make Mr. Prajwal. Okay, that's fine. So that is the thing. To maintain electrical neutrality, equal number of positive and negative ions will be missing out. Now what actually happens, since positive and negative ions are missing out from the entire solid, what happens to density? Decreases. See, for that matter, any defect, when it increases in a solid, stability of the entire solid decreases. So we can conclude here, density decreases, stability also decreases as the Schottky defect increases. Is that okay? So fine. Now, what kind of ionic solids exhibit Schottky defect? If you see, generally ionic solids with higher coordination number. When I say higher, 6 and above. Okay, so higher coordination number exhibit, and in most of the cases, it so happens that the ionic solids with Schottky defect will have comparable ionic sizes. When I say that, there are certain excuses here and there. Comparable sizes are seen in most of the examples. Okay, so higher coordination number and ionic size should be comparable. These 2 points can be remembered. Sometimes they'll give you in competitive exams, which among the following would exhibit Schottky defect or Frankel defect, something like that. So you can see there ions of comparable size. One hint, but can't be relied completely on that. But higher coordination number is one thing. So generally, when higher coordination number is there, every ion will be surrounded with many ions nearby. So there are chances that some particles may be missing out. So those are the 2 conditions under which Schottky defect can be found. So example, you can see NaCl, KCl. They have almost comparable size. CCM chloride is, in terms of size, it may be slightly exceptional case, but coordination number is 8, CCM chloride. We have seen this structure. Okay, so NaCl, KCl becomes 6. So higher coordination number, comparable size. See, one fact, matter of fact, you just see so that you can understand under normal condition as temperature increases from 0, how exactly the Schottky defect can be induced. So it's been found in NaCl approximately a million, 10 raised to 6 Schottky pairs per centimeter cube are found at room temperature. Okay, under normal conditions only, even in NaCl, around million Schottky pairs. That means a million of Cl minus, a million of Na plus will be there. Schottky pairs. Okay. So the number of defects increase with increase in temperature that I told you. Right. So this is about Schottky defect. Now previously we encountered 2 defects in non-ionic solids: vacancy defect, interstitial defect. So can you correlate the Schottky defect is similar to vacancy defect or interstitial defect? Which it sounds similar.
Vacancy defect.
Pardon me?
Vacancy.
Vacancy. So in non-ionic solid, vacancy defect is almost same as Schottky defect in ionic solids. Only difference is there any number of particles can be absent because it is non-ionic. Formula will not be affected. Here, pair of ions must be missing. Electrical neutrality and stoichiometry both. Okay. So fine. We'll take up next Frenkel defect. The second type of stoichiometric defect in ionic solids. Here, smaller ion of the ionic solid. Mostly it is cation in most of the cases. A smaller ion, that is cation, leaves its lattice point and occupies in an interstitial site. Of course, it is similar to interstitial defect of non-ionic solids. Same thing. So, a smaller ion of the ionic solid will leave its lattice site and go and occupy in the neighboring void space or interstitial site. So this becomes a deviation from the regular arrangement, and therefore it is a defect called Frenkel defect. Now, in comparison with the Schottky defect, so what is that we can point out here? Since some particles are dislocating from the same position, okay, so density remains the same, mass remains the same because they are not removed like Schottky defect. Density remains same, but however, any defect when it increases or when it is induced, stability is at stake. So when these defects increase, stability decreases. That's all. Okay. So in comparison, Schottky defect when it increases, density decreases. Frenkel defect when it increases, density remains same. This can be a CT question. In both the case, stability decreases for that matter. Okay. Now they are also called dislocation effects. Fine. Because it is dislocated. Now, what kind of ionic solids exhibit this Frenkel defect? Generally, ionic solids with a large difference in ionic size and low coordination. So, I think easily you can remember the condition of Schottky defect is exactly different or opposite to Frenkel defect. So, low coordination number, large difference in ionic size. Low coordination number is a reliable factor. Okay. Now, when you see the example here, silver chloride, silver iodide, and also you can generalize one thing: silver halides, Frenkel defect. An exception for silver halide is AGBr. AGBr exhibits both Frenkel and Schottky defect. Is that okay? So these are all the memory things you just need to remember. There can be question on this. Okay. So zinc sulfide, they all exhibit. Say coordination number is 4, zinc sulfide now, right? So low coordination number and large difference in ionic size. So this is about Frenkel. So I'll just correlate once again. In non-ionic solid, vacancy defect is same as Schottky defect of ionic solid. The interstitial defect of non-ionic solid is same as Frenkel defect of ionic solid. Okay. So only difference is here ions are there. So you should see to it that electrical neutrality is maintained in Schottky defect. So pair of ions will be missing. So fine. So this pic beautifully represents the Schottky defect and Frenkel defect. You can see here in the first diagram. So there is a pop-up also indicating ionic vacancies. Okay, one is large vacancy there, another one is smaller one. So smaller one corresponds to, you can see they're positive, and larger one corresponds to negative. So ionic vacancies because a pair of ions are missing from the lattice. Now you can see here. So this is ionic vacancy. There is no particle, whereas you can carefully observe here because this is the particle excess occupied from a lattice site dislocated to be accommodated into a vacant site, okay, or the void space. So cation at void space. This indicates Frenkel. Right. Now we'll take up non-stoichiometric defect. So what did we say for stoichiometric defect? The defect that doesn't affect stoichiometry. Then non-stoichiometric defect should be the defect which affect stoichiometry of the solid is what is the non-stoichiometric. They affect stoichiometry. Right? There are two types again. Under non-stoichiometric defect, there are two types: metal excess defect, metal deficiency defect. See, these are all the defects which generally happens in ionic solids. When it comes to ionic solids, there is cation, there is anion. Which part is generally metallic? Can you tell me? There is cation and anion. Which part is metallic?
Cation.
Cation is,
Cation.
anion will be non-metallic. So when I say metal excess defect, what should you immediately understand? In ionic solids, cations are more. Metal deficiency defect, when I say that cations are less, means anions are more. So whenever number of cations, number of anions vary, obviously that induces the defect. That would affect, of course, the stoichiometry. Here only the name only suggests you metal excess, number of cations are more. Obviously, composition, mole proportion, stoichiometry has to be affected. Metal deficiency, cations are less, anions are more, which means stoichiometry will be affected. So I think somebody is responding with the chat. Uh, okay, there is some question mark. Okay. See, don't chat in between. I say I would bar
Sorry,
that.
sir. Sorry, sir.
AES competitive companion. Yeah, I did. I got many answers wrong. This is required now. I say. Huh?
Sorry.
Ah, okay, Mr. Prahlad. Right. And now you pay attention towards the lesson. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, though it is virtual classroom, there are different ways of looking at you people. Okay. That's fine. We'll proceed. Now I was telling metal excess, metal deficiency, both will affect the stoichiometry. That's why it is non-stoichiometric. We'll take one by one now. Okay. That doesn't mean that you privately chat. Okay, that also I can find out. Now we'll proceed now. Metal excess defect. Metal excess defect in ionic solids can happen due to two reasons. Now, with common sense, we can find out which are those two reasons. Now, you take a particular ionic solid. Cations are there, anions are there. It should be equal in number for electrical neutrality. Let's say in that ionic solid, there are 100 cations, 100 anions. Now, when 100 cations, 100 anions are there, it is electrically neutral. Metal excess means cation must be more in number. There are two reasons, or there are two ways in which metal excess can happen. Which are the two ways? 100 cation, 100 anion, equal in number. If metal excess has to happen, 100 cation has to become 102 cation, anions as it is, right? When cations become 102, 2 cation became excess. That is one way. 100 anions only, but cations 102 it became. Now in another way, 100 cations, let it be as it is, anions 98 or 95. So what has happened actually? When cation remain as it is, when anion number comes down, then also it becomes metal excess. That is what we mean by saying the two reasons or two ways rather. One, having more cations than anions. Another, some anions being absent in the site. In both the case, metal excess can happen. Those are the two ways. One, metal excess defect due to anionic vacancies. This is important. This results in something called formation of F centers. So we can find out what is this F center and all those things. Now, metal excess defect due to anionic vacancies. When I say that, anions have vacated their lattice site, so that in the entire solid, anions number will be less, cations number will be slightly more. Right? So what actually happens during anionic vacancies? Anions vacate lattice points and create a void or a hole there. Okay, hole. Electron. Now the question that would arise is, when anion vacates the site, cation become excess. That can be this example. That's fine. But when anion vacates, overall electrical neutrality is at stake. So that has to be maintained. Though anions leave the position, overall electrical neutrality of the solid should be maintained. That's the question, how it maintains. See, the answer is in this sentence. Electron trapped in anionic site maintains electrical neutrality, meaning when anion vacates the lattice site, an electron either from that anion or during that process. We'll take an example, you will get more clarity. So an electron would be trapped in the anionic site. That electron is also negative. One anion is vacating, one electron is getting trapped. Overall total negative charge is still balanced. So how a electrical neutrality is maintained in the anionic vacancy type? Electron trap in the anionic sites will balance the electrical neutrality. And these electrons which are trapped in the anionic vacancies are called F centers. Actually, it is Greek. Uh, it is called Forbin center. Forbin is color center. So that means these centers which are having electrons trapped will have or will induce color into the solids. Is that okay? So therefore, that entire solid having these kind of F centers will have a tinge of a particular color. It may be pale pink or pale yellow, these kind of things. Is that okay? So any solid which has electron trapped in the anionic vacancy will induce color, for the reason that the electron trapped in the anionic vacancy will absorb visible light and re-emit. So this kind of thing happens during which it gets oscillated. Because of this absorption re-emission, there is a particular characteristic color induced into the solid. Is that okay? That is Forbin center, Farb center, or F center. That is color center. That is the meaning of the type. So you need to remember this extra aspect that happens here. The non-stoichiometric defect, under which there is metal excess defect, which happens due to anionic vacancy, will have a F center. Right. Now there is an example. You take sodium chloride, heat that sodium chloride in the atmosphere of sodium metal. When you heat it strongly, it becomes vapor. So sodium vapors are there surrounding the sodium chloride. Sodium atoms will come and settle on the surface of the sodium chloride. At the same time, chloride ions from sodium chloride lattice will diffuse to the surface of sodium chloride. Cl minus from NaCl lattice, which is diffused to the surface, will combine with Na atom on the surface. But Na atom, for that, it has to lose one electron to combine with Cl minus. So Na loses one electron, becomes Na plus and combines with Cl minus, which is diffused out of the solid. Now the electron will come back and gets trapped into the Cl minus. This is the theory about it. Okay. So NaCl, when heated in the atmosphere of sodium vapors, the chloride ions diffuse to the surface and combine with sodium atoms to give NaCl. The electrons lost by sodium atoms diffuse and occupy the anionic vacancies and they become F centers. And because of this particular NaCl, which is now having defects, where electrons are trapped in the anionic vacancies, will be pale yellow. So it will be slightly appearing yellow. Okay. So this is. So they impart yellow color to the NaCl. The color is due to absorption of visible light by these electrons. So that's about metal excess defect due to anionic vacancies. Next, due to interstitial cations, which is the other way. See, 100 cations, 100 anions. Anions have left the position. So anionic vacancies create metal excess. Now interstitial cations, meaning extra cations will come and occupy in the interstitial side. So that number of cations increase. Anions will remain same. Cations become more. This also results in metal excess defect. So due to interstitial cations, excess cations occupy interstitial site. Okay. Electrons occupy vacant lattice sites and interstitial sites to maintain electrical neutrality. In the previous case, electron gets trapped in the anionic site, whereas here electrons occupy vacant site and even interstitial site or any one, but electron gets trapped again. So to maintain the electrical neutrality. So what is one common factor in both the cases? The electron will balance the charge, overall charge, that is there arising due to imbalance of the anions and number of anions and cations. So electrons are balancing the electrical neutrality. Fine. Example, zinc oxide appears white at normal temperature. Fine. On heating, it turns yellow as part of zinc oxide decomposes. Actually, zinc in this zinc oxide is Zn plus 2. Zn plus 2 is 3d10. 3d10 means there should be no electron because no unpaired electron. 3d10 is completely paired. So unpaired electron, if it is there in metal, later you will see there can be some color for the metal. But zinc oxide contains Zn plus 2, which is still 3d10 only. Yet, upon heating, zinc oxide will develop some kind of yellow color for the reason that electron will be trapped in the vacancies, creating this kind of color. Now the equation that indicates decomposition, zinc oxide when heated becomes Zn2 plus. Of course, even in zinc oxide, it's Zn2 plus only. But oxygen escapes out, releasing the electron. Those electrons will be trapped. Electrons get trapped in the lattice site and induce color into the system. This peak represent both the type metal excess defect due to anionic vacancy and the metal excess defect, right? So here, due to interstitial cations also. Now, first peak indicate electron trapped in the anionic vacancy, that is called F center, right? Now you can see the second one. Here there is a cation at the interstitial site. Now the electron which is trapped in the other interstitial site, or sometimes in a anionic vacancy, or both, can balance the electrical neutrality. So in both the cases, it is very clear electron is trapped in the anionic vacancy. Is it an anion there? Look at that. Neighboring site is cation. So obviously it should be anionic vacancy. Electron is trapped there. So it is absent. Here, a cation is trapped in the void. So electron is there in the other void. So this is interstitial cation. In both the case, cations are excess. So it is metal excess defect. First diagram due to anionic vacancy. Second diagram due to interstitial cation. Is it okay? So this is about metal excess defect. What is next? Metal deficiency defect. So I'm just recalling what we are doing. We are studying non-stoichiometric defect. Non-stoichiometric defect due to metal excess defect. Two types we have done. Now metal deficiency defect. Now in an ionic solid, let's say there are 100 cations, 100 anions. Now electrically neutral it is. Metal deficiency means what? Cation should be less in number. Again, how many ways of having less number of cations? 100, both are equal. If 98 cations are there, then it is metal deficiency. Anions are same, cations have reduced. In other case, if 105 anions are there, if 105 anions are there, then anions are more, so metal deficiency. But the problem is, if anion number has to be more, anions being larger in size, where they have to be accommodated in the void. But voids will be always smaller than the particles which are there in the lattice. As a result, the second type, that is metal deficiency due to excess anions in the interstitial site, is not a common example here. So that cannot happen. So excess anions in the interstitial site is not a common example. So for the reason that anions being large, they can't fit into smaller voids. So that examples you don't get it as a example, right? So metal deficiency defect. So we have one type of the defect which is caused by cationic vacancy here. Okay, what is this? Amount of the metal decreases, stoichiometric proportion gets affected. So number of cations vacate, that's the meaning when I say decreases. So number of cations vacate, creating cationic vacancies. Now immediate question that arises is, when cations vacate the lattice site, of course it induces metal deficiency defect, but which will maintain electrical neutrality. So for that, the electrical neutrality is maintained by the oxidation of neighboring cation. Okay, let's say one cation is missing from its lattice site, having +1 charge. The neighboring cation gets oxidized. +1 becomes +2. So +1 to +2, one positive charge increases. That would balance the loss of one positive charge due to absence of a cation. We'll take an example. See, in case of ferrous oxide, the formula of ferrous oxide is FeO. Ferric oxide is Fe2O3. So ferrous is Fe plus 2, right? So FeO is found existing as Fe 0.950. Look at the composition. FeO formula indicates Fe2 plus is to O2 minus is 1:1, correct? Whereas in FeO, which is defective solid, Fe is 0.95, O is 1. So that means for every one oxygen atom, only 0.95 Fe2 plus ions are there. Is that okay? That means what? The formula itself suggests you that some cations must be missing. You have to again go to the notes and find out what it is. Or remember, the formula itself tell you FeO should be 1:1. Fe is 0.95 means it has come down from 1. So cations are vacated. So Fe 0.95O is a defective solid. The two, it has metal deficiency defect and stoichiometry is affected. That's why it is non-stoichiometric defect. Now the question is, when Fe2 plus ions are absent, which will balance the electrical neutrality? So neighboring Fe2 plus ions get oxidized. Okay. Now Fe is 2 plus. When one Fe2 plus is lost, two neighboring Fe2 plus ions have to be oxidized to ferric ions, Fe3 plus ions. So the two positive charges balance. So overall, you can just remember the loss in positive charges due to the metal deficiency defect will be balanced by oxidation of neighboring cations. Right. This diagram beautifully depicts actually what happens in FeO. So this is a FeO crystal lattice. Larger green particle is Fe2 plus. Smaller pink particle is Fe2 plus. Okay, sorry. Larger green particle is O2 minus, and smaller pink particle is Fe2 plus. Now, when some particles vacate, Fe2 plus particles, that has to be, the charge has to be balanced by the oxidation of neighboring particle. You can follow the cursor. Green O2 minus, pink Fe2 plus. Now orange is Fe3 plus. Now look at that. The pink lattice site is vacant here. That means Fe2 plus is missing. The two positive charges have to be balanced by the oxidation of neighboring Fe2 plus ion. So Fe2 plus becomes Fe3 plus. So one positive charge is balanced there. So this Fe2 plus also becomes Fe3 plus. So from both Fe2 plus becoming to Fe3 plus, the loss in plus 2 charge is balanced. That's the meaning. Is that okay? So let's proceed. The last one is impurity defect. We have told in the beginning itself, point defects are of three types. Stoichiometric defect, non-stoichiometric defect, and impurity defect. Right? We have studied now stoichiometric defect, and then non-stoichiometric defect, now impurity defect. Fine. What is impurity defect? As the name itself suggests, some impurity when it is present in addition to all the ions. What actually happens? The impurity has to be accommodated in some of the places. Either the host ion may vacate, or the impurity may go and settle down in a vacant space or something like that. But any deviation in the regular arrangement induces a defect. So here, in case of impurity defect, presence of impurity in the lattice point of the host ion happens. Okay, some host ions will be replaced by impurity ions. So next question that we need to answer is, how about electrical neutrality, right? So neighboring cations vacate to maintain neutrality. If one cation is occupied in the lattice site of host ion, there may be chances that the impurity ion may have more positive charge. Then in such cases, neighboring cations vacate to balance the charge. We'll take an example. Addition of strontium chloride to NaCl induces impurity defect. How? See, Sr2 plus in strontium chloride, strontium is 2 plus. In NaCl, Na is plus 1. So when SrCl2 is added to NaCl, simply not in solid state, in molten state, When you mix and then solidify, this kind of things happen. Okay, so strontium ions will go and occupy the lattice site of Na plus ion. So when one Na plus lattice site is replaced by Sr2 plus, what would happen? Loss is +1 charge, but what has been added is +2 charge in terms of Sr2 plus ion. So electrical neutrality is at stake now. So one extra positive charge that is gained due to the induction of Sr2 plus has to be balanced. For that, in order to balance that, a neighboring Na plus ion also vacates. That means for every introduction of one Sr2 plus ion, two Na plus ions will be replaced, of which one lattice point of Na plus ion will be occupied by Sr2 plus. Another Na plus lattice site is vacant. So it concludes that for every introduction of Sr2 plus ion, one Na plus cationic vacancy will be created. I'll repeat. When one Sr2 plus introduces into the sodium chloride lattice, two Na plus has to be replaced, of which the lattice site of one Na plus will be occupied by Sr2 plus. Another Na plus lattice site is vacant. It concludes to for every Sr plus 2 ion, one Na plus vacancy will be created. For 100 Sr2 plus ions induced, 100 Na plus vacancy will be created. For 1000 Sr2 plus ions induced, 1000 cationic vacancy will be created. That's the meaning. Okay. So I think this diagram clearly indicates that the shaded out or blackened spot of the cationic vacancy indicates Na plus has left its lattice site to balance the charge, and of which Sr2 plus has occupied the lattice site of one Na plus. Right. Now, pertaining to this, of course, cationic vacancy, I have just mentioned here. One question is there. You need to just answer. I will not give solution. The question goes like this. 0.5 mole of strontium chloride is added to sodium chloride. Calculate the number of cationic vacancies produced. Immediately. Tuck like. Anybody? I just have given 100,000 everything. No?
Half of Avogadro's number.
Ah, very nice. Half of Avogadro number. How much is this?
3 into 10 to the power
3.11 into 10 to the power
3.011 into 10 raised to 23 cationic vacancies will be created. That's all. Very good. Okay. Anyhow, since you have given, I'll just give the solution. Each Sr2 plus ion replaces two Na plus ions, of which it occupies one cationic vacancy and produces another vacancy. Correct? Now, number of Sr2 plus ions would be equal to number of cationic vacancies. That is important conclusion, right? So 0.5 mole of strontium chloride would be 0.5 mole of cationic vacancy. 0.5 of a mole is Avogadro number. 0.5 into 6.02 10 raised to 23 would be equal to 3.011 10 raised to 23 number of cationic vacancies. Is it okay? Same problem is there in your material. No need to write. Right. Now, those are the defects, stoichiometric defects in non-ionic solids, vacancy and interstitial defect. In ionic solids, vacancy becomes Schottky defect, interstitial defect becomes Frenkel defect. Right? The differences you need to maintain. Then, non-stoichiometric defect, which affect this stoichiometry. Metal excess defect can happen in two ways. Metal excess defect. One is anionic vacancy, F center. Electron gets trapped. Interstitial cations, again electrons will balance being trapped at the void space or a lattice site. Another one is metal deficiency defect. Metal deficiency can happen due to cationic vacancies, but it cannot be a common example having extra anion in the lattice. So we'll not. So cationic vacancies created. How electrical neutrality is maintained? By the oxidation of neighboring cations. FeO is an example. Then impurity defect. Impurities are induced Host ions will be replaced. How electrical neutrality is maintained? By the vacation, by some of the cations getting vacated at the lattice site. Some of the cations getting vacated the lattice site will maintain the electrical neutrality. So this is overall defects, right? Now at the end, we are going to take properties of solids. When it comes to properties of solids, we need to study the electrical properties and magnetic properties. So solids, when I say anything is a solid here, ionic solid, molecular solid, metallic crystal, okay, covalent crystal, like that. So we have seen many solids conducting electric current, and some of the solids do not conduct, and some partly conduct. Based on that conductivity, so solids have some of the electrical properties. So now we can classify solids based on their electrical properties into conductors. The substances or solids which allow electric current to pass through. Typically, their conductivity values is there lying between 10 raised to 4 to 10 raised to 7. That means so much electric current will be conducted. Ohm inverse per meter. Ohm inverse is also called Simon. So 10 raised to 4 to 10 raised to 7, that much conductivity is observed in metallic conductors. Especially these D block elements and all being a very good conductors, they will have the other end, that is the fag end of for the conductivity value 10 raised to 7 Simon per meter. Okay, so much conductance is seen in any solid means it can be concluded as conductor. Okay, now in case of metallic conductors, what actually happens when temperature increases? Conductance decreases. You have studied in physics. As temperature increases in metals, resistance increases. As resistance increases, conductance decreases. So in other words, as temperature increases, conductance decreases is one observation we can make in these conductors. Example, any metal we can make, okay, copper, silver, aluminum. Semiconductors. The substance whose conductivity value lies between that of conductors and insulator. That means they feebly conduct electric current. That's the main. So conductivity is in between conductors and insulators. Then what about conductivity? How much they conduct electric current? Look at that. 10 raised to minus 6 to 10 raised to 4. It is very less. 10 raised to minus 6, too less. Okay. So 10 raised to 4 is the other higher end. Simon per meter or ohm inverse per meter. Now, in case of semiconductors, as temperature increases, conductance also increases. This is one observation. Later, we are going to explain this. Okay, so that's it. Silicon and germanium are the two examples which always be given under semiconductor, right? Silicon, germanium, and of course, later we convert them into extrinsic semiconductor and get other varieties also. Now it is silicon and germanium are two examples. Now, insulators. For all practical purpose, we say insulator doesn't allow electric current to pass. But they have the conductivity value which is negligible. That's why we almost say they doesn't allow. Okay. So the conductivities lie between 10 raised to minus 10 to minus 20. It is just not at all felt by even by touching. Okay. You just can't feel it, right? Example, rubber, glass, plastic, diamond, all these things are the bad conductors or insulators. Now, this electrical property of solids has to be explained. There is a theory which has been proposed to explain these electrical properties, which means why some solids can partly conduct, why not some other? If some solids can conduct completely, why not others? Certain solids will not conduct only, how come? So these questions have to be answered. This band theory utilizes the concept of molecular orbital theory. Electronic students would have already studied this band theory. If at all, if electronic students are there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Correct, no? This band theory, all those things. Okay. Can you brief up in 3 or 2 sentences? What is this band theory? How does metals or conductors, insulators differ?
Sir, in all elements, there will be conduction band and valence band, sir.
Correct.
Conduction band is the band where is the energy region where valence electron exists.
Free electrons.
Valence
Electrons.
free
Free
electron.
electrons are in conduction band.
Valence band is valence
There are different
electron.
theories.
From valence band, they move to conduction band through the forbidden energy gap.
In metals, they coincide. The energy levels overlap with each other, sir.
That's exactly right. Okay.
In semiconductors, there is a small gap, and in insulators,
Fine.
there is a very
Now that's all fine. Now I want an answer. You told about a valence band, conduction band. The theory is fine. That explains how exactly these three different solids differ in their electrical properties. Now, how is that band formed? What is that band all about? See, you start with the band already, but band has to be formed, no? What is that band? How is that band formed?
it's an
Anybody?
energy level, sir.
Energy gap.
No, there is conduction band. There is valence band. What is that band? How is that band produced?
Band means it is the region of energy of the electrons, sir.
Mhm.
Means like shell only.
Okay. So apart
So,
from these shells, there
sir,
is
like
more.
there will be two molecular orbitals.
Okay. Then.
So the energy gap between them may form a band.
Vinay is from electronics or biology?
No, sir, biology.
Oh, that's a good thing. You would have looked into notes. Correct, huh?
Sir,
You have seen that in explanation in the notes.
no, sir.
Okay. Then it's fantastic. Okay. Let me explain. Chemistry gives you an idea or concept how those bands are also formed, right? So band theory. Band theory is actually based on molecular orbital theory. Okay, that's the reason. Okay. Molecular orbital theory, if you can recall from chemical bonding, first year PUC, the theory says that if two atoms have to combine to form a molecule, atomic orbital of atom A and atomic orbital of atom B have to undergo overlapping by a process called linear combination of atomic orbitals, LCAO. Linear combination of atomic orbitals of two combining atoms give two types of molecular orbitals. One has less energy called bonding molecular orbital. Another has more energy called anti-bonding molecular orbital. Bonding molecular orbital. Energy is less, energy is more. Now, when millions of atoms undergo this kind of linear combination, if 10 atoms undergo, there will be 5 bonding, 5 anti-bonding. If 100 undergo linear combination, 50 bonding, 50 anti-bonding. If 1000 undergo, 500 bonding, 500 anti-bonding. Like that, in a small sample of a metal, there can be trillions of atoms. So, trillion by 2, we can say n by 2 bonding, n by 2 anti-bonding. All these n by 2 bonding molecular orbitals have very less energy difference, almost negligible energy difference. So that all those bonding molecular orbitals n by 2 will all form a band or appear as a band that is called a valence band. All those anti-bonding molecular orbitals, among themselves, the energy difference is negligible. All those appear as a band, that is conduction band. Now, where do electrons reside? We know that orbitals with lower energy is occupied. So this valence band has low energy. So electrons will come and occupy first into the valence band. So electrons are found in the valence band. Conduction band being high energetic, it is largely empty. There is energy gap between valence band and conduction band. That energy gap is forbidden region or forbidden zone. Okay, that is not something which can be experienced or something seen. Now that energy gap between VB, that is valence band, CB, conduction band, decides the property, electrical property. It's all. If energy gap is too much between them, too much high, then electron from valence band cannot be promoted at all by crossing that energy band. If energy gap is moderate, in such cases, if you supply some energy by increasing temperature, electron in valence band can get promoted to conduction band. Conduction is possible. If the energy gap is too less, or if energy gap is not at all there, if overlapping happens between valence band and conduction band, then movement of electron from one band to another band takes place at ease just by maintaining potential difference. And these are the three scenarios applicable for conductors, semiconductors, and insulators. In case of conductors, valence band would have overlapped with the conduction band, so that electron can easily cross into the conduction band just by maintaining potential difference. That's why the conductors easily conduct electric current. There is huge conduction value. Okay. Whereas in semiconductor, there is a little difference between a little energy difference between valence band and conduction band. That energy gap can be crossed by the electron by increasing temperature. That's why we have come across the characteristic that in case of semiconductor, conductance increases with temperature. Why so? When temperature increases, electrons in valence band absorb energy and cross the energy barrier. That's why with increase in temperature, the conduction increases in semiconductor. Whereas in case of the insulators, the energy gap is too high that it goes beyond screen now, you can't see. As a result, even with increasing temperature, the electrons in the valence band cannot cross the energy barrier and pass. Therefore, they do not conduct. The same thing is being shown here. The electrical conductivity of metals is explained by band theory based on molecular orbital theory. Accordingly, the atomic orbitals of metals overlap to form molecular orbitals. The energy gap between successive molecular orbitals is very small, so that they form a band. Lower energy band formed is called valence band, higher energy band is conduction band. The two bands differ by an energy gap called forbidden zone. Magnitude of energy gap decides electrical property of metal. So what is in case of metal? Valence band and conduction band overlap. Electrons easily flow under the influence of applied electric field as they conduct. Semiconductors, the energy gap is small. Electron can jump from valence band to conduction band, and conduction band. Conduction increases with temperature. In case of insulators, energy gap is large. Electrons jump from valence band to conduction band. Even with the increase of temperature, it can't do that. Okay, so that is insulator. Now this diagram easily indicates the concept that we have just learned. You can see here, this is the way energy increases. So lower energy band is valence band, has more stability or less energy, high energy conduction. Okay, so there is overlap between the two. Electrons can easily flow. So that is the scenario in case of metals. In case of semiconductor, there is a small gap. So electron transfer happens with temperature. Insulator, there is a large gap. The electrons cannot transfer. So these are the okay. So this is one theory which would have studied in your lower standards also, at least in some of the ICSE or CBSE series, right? So we'll take a further. Now, semiconductor, just little elaboration on semiconductors. Again, electronic students would have studied this. So semiconductors basically are of two types: intrinsic semiconductors, extrinsic semiconductors. Intrinsic semiconductors are pure semiconductors, which are pure elements that act as semiconductors, silicon and germanium, group 14 elements, right? These intrinsic semiconductors possess very low conductance at room temperature. Now, silicon and germanium, they have covalent bonds and tetravalent they are. They are not like metals where there are free electrons in the electron sea. Because of that free electron, easy conduction happens. Now, we have told here in this sentence, possess very low conductance at room temperature. Silicon and germanium being tetravalent covalent substances, how come they can conduct is the question. Any electronic students?
Impurities is added.
Kishan?
Impurities is added.
No,
Without
it's a
impurities
pure,
also
I'm telling.
conduct, sir.
Pure semiconductors or intrinsic semiconductors have low conductance. Okay,
Yes.
however low, how come they conduct first of all?
With
As the
increase in temperature, they
temperature increases means they lose some ions, sir, due to
It is
the
ions, it is atom. Sumedh was telling something.
with increase in temperature, the free electrons will gain some energy.
There is electrons are there in the bonds here. It is not like metal.
Yes, sir, but all electrons belong to one type of atom, either silicon or germanium, sir.
Fine.
As the temperature increases, electrons will gain energy and move from valence band to conduction band.
Okay. That is one perception what we have given in terms of molecular orbital concept, valence band and conduction. When it comes to bonding, silicon would form four bonds with the neighbors. And the four valence electrons of silicon would be trapped in the four bonds. Now, when it comes to chemistry aspect of these four bonds, covalent bond means a bond which is formed by sharing up of electrons. All the four valence electrons of silicon would be there in the four bonds, covalent bonds. Generally, electrons in the covalent bond, there remains static. If electrons are all involved in the four covalent bonds with every atom of silicon or germanium, there will be no free electrons. When free electrons are there, not there, then conduction shouldn't be possible.
Yes, sir.
So I want chemistry reason.
Sir,
Uh,
the electrons will come away from the bond when extra energy is supplied, sir.
Yes. Which means, more
It-
aptly, we can say this.
Potential.
So under normal conditions of temperature and pressure, few bonds, covalent bonds would have got ruptured, broken down. When covalent bonds break, electrons become free. Otherwise, they will not become free. So under normal conditions of temperature and pressure, few bonds would have broken. Few electrons should be free. Few electrons can conduct little current. That's why they have low conductance at normal temperature. When temperature keeps increasing, electrons of the bond keeps breaking. So electrons can become more and more free to conduct. That's the meaning. But however, these intrinsic semiconductors, which conduct due to electrons which are obtained by breaking up of covalent bonds, that is very less. It is good for nothing. So it can't be used for any application, being the fact that these semiconductors conduct very feeble current. So what we have to do now, we have to increase the conductivity of intrinsic semiconductors. How to increase the conductivity of intrinsic semiconductors so that they can be more significant? By adding impurity. So this sentence, the conductivity in semiconductors can be increased by adding a suitable impurity called dopant. Addition of dopant is called doping. The process is called doping. Now, the impure semiconductor thus obtained is called an extrinsic semiconductor. That's why intrinsic semiconductors are pure semiconductors and extrinsic semiconductors are impure semiconductors as they are obtained by adding impurity into intrinsic semiconductors. Now, what kind of impurity you are going to add? That decides two types of extrinsic semiconductors. There are two types of extrinsic semiconductors. One is N-type semiconductor. It is electron-rich semiconductor. So we are going to add electron-rich impurities to get N-type semiconductor. N indicates negative here. Electron-rich impurities will be added to silicon or germanium, so that it becomes negative type. Extra electrons will be there to make it negative. That's the meaning. So N-type semiconductor. So what is that? How do we get it? Silicon or germanium, which is 14th group element, is doped with pentavalent impurity. See, 14th group elements will have 4 valence electrons. That's why it is tetravalent. The next group, 15th group elements, have 5 valence electrons. They are all pentavalent. So when this 14th group element, silicon germanium, is doped, means added with pentavalent impurities such as arsenic or phosphorus of 15th group, then you get a N-type semiconductor. Actually, what happens? The see 15 group element has 5 electrons. Of 5 electrons, 4 are used to make bonds with the neighboring silicon or germanium. So still one electron remains unbonded with that impurity 15 group element. That electron which is not unbonded will add to the overall conductance of the conductor, semiconductor. So extrinsic semiconductor thus obtained will have more conductance. Okay, that's it. So we'll take it first. P types. So N type is obtained by adding 15 group impurity into 14 group semiconductor. P type, positive type. We are going to add electron deficient impurity to get P type semiconductor. So silicon, germanium of 14 group doped with trivalent impurity. Trivalent is 13 group, boron or aluminum. 13 group only makes 3 bonds. Excuse me. 13 group element when added, it can only make 3 bonds with the neighboring atoms. So one bond it can't make. As a consequence, it develops something called a positive vacancy or a positive hole. This positive hole also contribute to the overall conductance. What this positive hole do? It will attract the electrons of the neighboring bonds. Neighboring bonds will rupture. Electrons migrate into the positive hole. This kind of process will also add to the overall conductance. Thereby, P-type semiconductor being extrinsic has more conductance than intrinsic semiconductor. This diagram depicts neatly. Okay, see, in this first diagram, you just imagine this particle red. Actually, there is incompleteness here. This is phosphorus. This green tinge is there. Actually, this is boron, 13 group. And because of this phosphorus, there is an extra electron. 4 electrons of phosphorus are utilized. 1 electron is extra. In boron, 3 are used to make bonds. 1 is creating positive hole. Okay, the electron of the neighboring silicon induces positive hole here. This is the vacant space that is positive. So you can see here excess electron in N-type semiconductor. This is positive vacancy which is there in P-type semiconductor. That's why we say in case of N-type semiconductor, electrons are major charge carriers. In case of P-type semiconductor, positive holes are major charge carriers. Okay, that means the overall conductance is due to those electrons and positive holes only. See, when it comes to application of semiconductors, semiconductors N-type and P-type are combined to produce diodes, rectifiers, transistors, amplifiers, and all this. These diodes, rectifiers, transistors are used in every electronic equipment or device. You name an electronic device, there is semiconductor in any of these forms. TV, tape recorder, or antenna, or mobile, or anything you take, semiconductors must be used either in diodes or rectifiers in the form of transistors. Okay, so obviously in the electronic equipments such as TV, computers, mobiles, washing machine, or name anything, there will be generally semiconductors in one or the other form. So extensively used in electronic industry. Right? So this is about electrical property of solids. Next we'll take up the magnetic properties of solids. See, this magnetic property, we already encountered some of the magnetic properties. We know, see, this paramagnetic, diamagnetic, and ferromagnetic we know. In addition to these 3 properties commonly encountered, 2 more properties is what we are going to study today. So when it comes to magnetic properties of solids, solids behave as magnets also, okay, or magnetic materials. Now, where do this magnetism come from? See, any moving charged particle generates magnetic field, we know from the principles of physics. Electron is a charged particle which is revolving around the nucleus and also it is spinning on its own axis. So there are 2 types of motion for electron in an atom. One is revolving around the nucleus and is spinning, rotation, spinning. Now, any motion of a charged particle generates the magnetic field. The rotation of electron and revolution of electron around the nucleus result in net magnetic field. So, atom itself behaves like a tiny magnet due to this electron revolution. So, overall, any substance will have thus magnetic property. Then substances have unpaired electrons. Unpaired electrons means their spins will be in the same direction. As a result, overall magnetic moments will be added up. Unpaired electrons will have spin in the same direction. Their magnetic moments will be added up. In such cases, the resulting substance which are having unpaired electrons will have net magnetic moment that has net magnetic property. Such substances when kept in the external magnetic field will feel the attraction from the external magnetic field. They can be called as paramagnetic substances. If substances have paired electrons means spin opposite. Their magnetic moments get cancelled. Such substances with paired electrons, when kept in the external magnetic field, they repel. They are diamagnetic substances. So paramagnetic due to unpaired electrons, diamagnetic due to absence of unpaired electrons. So I'll just give this. Electron revolves around the nucleus by spinning on its own axis. Two motions produce a net magnetic field, which is the root cause of magnetic properties of solids. Just a schematic representation here. This is an atom has orbit. This is the nucleus, the electron. See, this electron is rotation of electron. It indicates rotation of electron around the nucleus. That can develop the magnetic field in that direction. Similarly, this is again nucleus. The electron has spin. This also can give the magnetic field, spin of electron. So rotation of electron and spin of electron. So depending on the magnetic behavior of substance, they are classified. So paramagnetic, as I told you, weakly attracted by magnetic field. What is the reason? The presence of unpaired electrons is the reason. Unpaired electrons will produce net magnetic field or magnetic moment, they say. And because of which these substances, when kept in the external magnetic field, are weakly attracted. Unpaired electrons induces net magnetic moment. So substance get attracted by external magnetic field. So some of the examples, whichever has the unpaired electron is chromium, titanium, O2. That is O2 actually. I'm having some responses here. Okay, you want me to show the previous page, Sahana? Okay. One second. Is this the one which you are looking for? She wants the previous. Okay. Is it fine now? Okay. That's fine. We'll take it first. So this is unpaired electron. That's the reason. All those things fine. Now see, this they'll ask you which among the following is paramagnetic, diamagnetic. This concept you will come across in a chapter called D and F block elements later. Again, we see paramagnetic, diamagnetic reasons and all those things. There, they'll ask you which among the following. They'll give complexes, ions, or coordination compounds also to predict paramagnetic nature. Okay, right. Diamagnetic substance which are repelled by external magnetic field. What is the reason? Absence of unpaired electrons or presence of paired electrons. The magnetic moment of paired electrons get cancelled due to opposite spin. So the substance experience repulsion in the magnetic field. So some of the example, titanium. So you can see that titanium +2 is atomic number 22. So if you write electronic configuration 3d2 4s2, titanium plus 2 means 4s2 becomes 4s0. Still there are 2 unpaired electrons in D. Whereas titanium plus 4 would have lost all the 4 valence electrons, 2 from S and 2 from D. So it would be 3d0, 4s0. So no unpaired electron, should be diamagnetic like that. Similarly, Cu2O, cuprous oxide, Cu is plus 1 there, 3d10, 3d10 is fulfilled, so no unpaired electron. Whereas cupric oxide is CuO, where Cu is plus 2, 3d9, 1 unpaired electron, it will be paramagnetic. So water doesn't have, all the electrons are paired. So it's that. Ferromagnetic substances. So ferromagnetic substances are a few examples which we have. When such substances are kept in the external magnetic field, they're strongly attracted. So it's a special case of paramagnetism, right? So reason. The metal ions of ferromagnetic substances group into small region called domains. So these ferromagnetic substances have some extra unique structural features called domains, which are not seen in paramagnetic substances. So what are these domains? These are the small regions in solids, those ferromagnetic substances where ferromagnetic ions would have gathered to make one small region called domain. Each domain acts as a tiny magnet. Such a substance gets strongly attracted in magnetic field. Actually, every domain will have magnetic moment in the same direction aligned in presence of external magnetic field. These domains are strongly magnetic in nature. That is the added advantage, which induces a special property that is strongly attracted by magnetic field. The alignment of magnetic moments does not change even after the removal of external magnetic field. So what happens? These substances have domains which are small areas with strong magnetic moments. When these substances are kept in the external magnetic field, all domains will have same inclination, orientation of magnetic moments in the direction of applied magnetic field, and that's why they get strongly attracted by external magnetic field. That is one thing. Secondly, even after removal of external magnetic field, the ferromagnetic substances would have retained some magnetic field into the substance. It will retain some magnetism in it. What is the reason? So even after the removal of external magnetic field, the alignment of magnetic moments does not change. As a result, these substances, ferromagnetic substances, would have retained some magnetism in it. Okay, so that's why they themselves behave as magnets afterwards. So for example, if you take iron and take manganese, which is magnet, and rub it against it, after some time, the iron itself behaves like a magnet. That's the reason, because domains, everything will orient in the same direction of applied magnetic field. Then the same magnetism will be seen in the ferromagnetic material. Hence, these substances can be easily magnetized to a permanent magnet. So they are used in producing permanent magnets. Some examples: iron, cobalt, nickel, chromium oxide. Right. So this is ferromagnetism, which has domains as the reason for it. Right. The fourth one is anti-ferromagnetic substance, and ferrimagnetic substance is fifth one. See, I'll tell you, this anti-ferromagnetic substance and ferrimagnetic substance, they both have similar magnetic moments like ferromagnetic substances. Anti-ferromagnetic and ferrimagnetic, next one. Both of them are similar in domain structure. They have same magnetic moments like ferromagnetic substances. But what actually happens in case of anti-ferromagnetic substances? No. In some cases, when substances are kept in the external magnetic field, the magnetic moments of domains become equal and opposite. That means they get cancelled. As a result, the net magnetic moments of these anti-ferromagnetic substances in presence of external magnetic field become zero. So they will be repelled by external magnetic field. That means, despite of having similar magnetic moments like ferromagnetic substances, if substances behave like diamagnetic in the external magnetic field, then they can be called as anti-ferromagnetic. Is that okay? The substances have similar magnetic moments like ferromagnetic, but will be repelled by the external magnetic field due to pairing up of electrons. Okay, so you can see the same thing I have given here. Anti-ferromagnetism repelled due to pairing up of electrons in the magnetic field. So their magnetic moments become zero there. They have similar domain structure as that of ferromagnetic material. Domains get oppositely oriented and cancel each other's magnetic moments in an external magnetic field. So they get repelled by magnetic field. So mu becomes zero. Mu is magnetic moment acting symbol. Some examples: MnOCr2O3, right? Ferrimagnetic, as I told you, ferrimagnetic substance also will have similar magnetic moments arrangement like ferromagnetic substance. But when kept in the external magnetic field, they are not strongly attracted. Instead, they are weakly attracted due to pairing of only few electrons in the magnetic field. So they too are similar to ferromagnetic materials, but magnetic moments of domains cancel partly in an external magnetic field. Hence, some of the magnetic moments still remain. Mu decreases. Mu is magnetic moment. Mu decreases, but not becomes zero in case of ferrimagnetic material. This results in the net magnetic moment, and they are weakly attracted by magnetic. That means, being like ferromagnetic, if it is repelled, it is anti-ferromagnetic. Other word, being like ferromagnetic, if it is partly attracted, it is ferrimagnetic. Is that okay? So some examples can be Fe3O4, we say magnetic oxide, and MgFe2O4. So these are some of the examples of ferrimagnetic substance. So this is about magnetic property of solids. Now, just a schematic representation of spins or magnetic moments in different substances. Orientation of spins. You can see ferromagnetic. All magnetic moments will be in the same direction. That's why they are strongly attracted by external magnetic field. In case of antiferromagnetic, they will be in the absence of external magnetic field similar to ferromagnetic, but the moment they are introduced into the magnetic field, their spins become opposite. In case of ferrimagnetic, few spins still remain, whereas few spins get cancelled. Because of these spins which are remaining, the net magnetic moment will be there. So that's why it will be weakly attracted. So this diagram indicates how exactly the spin orientation takes place in case of external magnet. So this is about magnetic properties, electrical properties, defects in solid. So fine, we'll meet for the next class. So we'll conclude for today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.